This video is brought to you by MagicJank.com, the spiciest cards for your sauciest decks. Buy and sell Magic the Gathering products and gear today on MagicJank.com. What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and today we're asking a very simple question. Can mono green aggro survive or, come back in Standard with the release of Phyrexia LB1? And I want to ask this question because I think the answer isn't going to be super clear cut. Right now, green is in a position where it is absolutely awful. If you are playing on the ladder right now, mono green is just not an option. You can play decks that leverage some green, like we have the Selesnya Enchantments deck that's out there kind of running around doing some stuff. I've also seen variants on the Soldier token decks that splash green for King Darien. So there are some variants out there that can leverage green. However, good old mono green aggro, the idea of just I get big beasts and I punch you in the face with them, which has been a staple in Magic for just straight up decades, doesn't exist right now in Standard as a competitive deck. But prior to rotation, it did. It was actually one of the better decks in the format for months. I mean, it's been tier 1 caliber excellent. Again, prior to rotation, so that wasn't that long ago. So why? What changed? Well, a big part of that was a lot of the key staples that the old mono green deck leveraged simply rotated out. We had cards like Werewolf Pack Leader, which was a 3/3 for 2 that if you triggered Pack Tactics upon attacking with it, you would just draw a card. So it's a 3/3 for 2 that can straight up draw you a card if you're already ahead on board. That's incredible. And then it also had a built-in pump ability. If you had 4 mana lying around, you could buff it up from a 3/3 to a 5/3 and give it trample. So that was kind of it, ascending into more of a bestial form and being stronger. All good stuff. This is all, it's just pure upside. But the base on it, 3/3 for 2, that's really where the bread got buttered. That was really the bomb with this card. It was just a big body early. And with green, you need bodies early on the board because everything that green does, for the most part, relies on you having at least one creature online. Now, the other example was Old Growth Troll. The curve out that deck generally wanted to do was turn 2 Werewolf Pack Leader into turn 3 Old Growth Troll, because you were getting a 3/3 for 2 followed by a 4/4 Trampler for 3. So right there, you're going into your turn 4. You've got 7 power on board. If all of it attacks, you're drawing a card. 4 of it has trample, and if your mana's up, the other 3 of it could become 5 and get trample as well. That alone was amazing, but there was even more. And this is a 4/4 Trampler for 3 with additional upside. If it dies, it ramps you, and it can effectively replace itself with a token later. So these were incredibly powerful creatures that were incredibly efficient for what they did, and they were the cornerstone of that mono green aggro deck. You needed super fast creatures, but beyond that too, it had one of the most efficient pieces of removal in the format. If you had a big creature down in Blizzard Brawl, the creature would be able to fight. It could potentially get a power boost and become indestructible. So if your opponent is on the draw, heaven forbid, they finally stick a 2-drop blocker to try to get in the way and mitigate, just kind of stop the bleeding. You hit them with a Blizzard Brawl. It's no, it doesn't matter anyway, and I'm still just going to blast you and potentially draw cards now as I'm hitting you. The deck was very, very strong. It was very, very powerful, and you'll note the 3 cards that I cite here as being kind of the linchpins of that deck, they all rotated. The entire deck just rotated out, and it just ceased to exist. We've seen it in the past where rotation hits a certain deck, and it modifies pretty dramatically, but there's still some semblance of it. Maybe it's not the tier 1 deck it was, but it still survives to some degree. Usually keep at least a couple pieces, and the thing can kind of continue. But in the case of the mono green deck, all the key pieces just disappeared and nothing filled the void. They just didn't exist. Couple that with an environment that has a couple of really incredible 3 and 4 drop threats, like your Graveyard Trespassers, your Shale Drids, that require you to run a lot of removal in your deck, and all of a sudden you have an environment where everybody's running a ton of removal, and your creatures aren't that great for their mana value. So all of a sudden, green just Green got completely wrecked by this rotation. The format became very removal heavy at a time when they lost all their best stuff. So green just ceased to exist. But can Phyrexia Obi-Wan change that? We need to see a couple of changes. We need to see a couple of things. Now, you'll note with Werewolf Pack Leader and Old Growth Troll, I was citing them being overstatted as being like the biggest benefit. So the question right now, do we have overstatted creatures that can really step up? Well, some of the current players that we have in the meta right now, Quirion Beastcaller. This is an excellent 2-drop. You get a 2/2 for 2, just good old Grizzly Bears on stats. However, every time you cast a creature spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then when it dies, you move those counters to something else. So if you're in a situation where this is allowed to survive, which right now it just doesn't, it dies to cut down if it hasn't had a chance to pump yet, and it dies to, go for the throat, Infernal Grasp, Lay Down Arms, Fateful Absence, you name it, like this thing just eats it to all of those. Actually, even Play with Fire kills this thing when it first drops. But if your opponent doesn't kill it immediately, it can grow out of, get out of hand. And then the other one that actually I have tinkered with a little bit, the curve that I've tinkered with in the past is Quirion Beastcaller into Kodama of the West Tree. Kodama of the West Tree is a 3/3 for 3 with reach. Now you'll note neither of these cards are overstated at their base level, which is really unfortunate. But Kodama of the West Tree, it does have reach, and is a 3/3 for 3. Modified creatures you control have trample, and whenever a modified creature you control deals combat damage to a player, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. So the way that these two cards work together, you have Quirion Beastcaller, which is just a 2/2. You go to your turn 3, you play the Kodama of the West Tree, it drops. Well, when you play it, you put a counter on Quirion Beastcaller. It then enters the battlefield, giving Quirion Beastcaller trample because it's now a modified creature. You can attack with it, get a land, then now you're ramping, and all of a sudden you have, 5 drops like Defiler of Vigor that you can all of a sudden be looking at, or Silverback Elder that have some real power in the later game. So that's a starting sequence that I think might actually work. Like it's efficient enough, and you get a strong 2-drop into a strong 3-drop that buffs your 2-drop, and you're kind of off to the races. But again, we're in a situation where just, kill spells and whatnot become just the thing. They're just absolutely everywhere. So we've identified we do have at least one good curve, but we also have a couple of other tools that are going to be coming in with Phyrexia Obi-Wan that I want to mention because I think they might be some of the key pieces we're missing. We also have Bloated Contaminator. This is a new 3-drop that looks a lot like Old Growth Troll to me. It is a 4/4 trampler for 2 into green. Old Growth Troll was green, by the way. This is splashable, potentially. But you have a 4/4 trampler for 3 in green with Toxic 1, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you proliferate. So all of a sudden, your Quirion Beastcaller is chilling with a +1/+1 counter. You get a Defiler of Vigor of down that's capable of putting +1/+1 counters on your entire team. So all of a sudden, if you get that going, this thing connecting means that you're not only putting a toxic, that you're giving your opponent a poison counter, but then you're proliferating, so you can bump that poison counter up to 2, or whatever number it happens to be at the time, and then your team that now, hopefully many of whom have +1/+1 counters, they're all buffing up as well. That's big time. Like, that's actually a very powerful effect that I don't think we can sleep on. I think this card has the potential to really make some waves in Standard. Whether it's in a true mono green exclusive aggro deck or not, I don't know, but keep an eye out for this thing. Like, honestly, of all the cards I've seen in Phyrexia Obi-Wan, and there are a lot of cool cards in a lot of different formats, I think this one fits the green aggro mentality possibly the best. I think it's incredibly good, and it is going to shake stuff up. You will see this card, and I like that. I like that a lot. You get a big beefy body. It's got trample, and it can get the toxic train rolling, which if you have other things that can leverage proliferate effects or carry poison counters on them, all of a sudden this can get dangerous. This thing can get very dangerous, and I like it a lot. We also have Tyrannax Rex, which is a new addition, which when you think aggro, you don't usually think 7 drops. So to be honest, this is a little bit of an honorary mention. I don't believe Tyrannax Rex is going to be a piece of a dedicated mono green aggro deck. However, we might see mono green ramp become a thing. Like Kodama the West Tree allows us to be ramping with lands, while we also have some cards like Sentinel Stalwart and whatnot that can ramp us, and Llanowar Loam Speaker, which can ramp us in other ways as well. If we can find a way to create a consistent ramp package in the early game, especially one that doesn't mind your stuff dying. Like, actually, Topiary Stomper, now that I think about it, could be a great 3-drop for that deck as well. Because it has an ETB effect. If your opponent kills it, you kind of don't mind. Like, you got your benefit. Anyway, but Tyrannex Rex, 8/8, Trampler for 7 that can't be countered with Ward 4 and Haste and Toxic 4. This thing's going to be a kill shot in a lot of decks and in a lot of games. If you're ramping, if you can incidentally ramp as you set up your game plan, this thing is going to be the haymaker that can end the game for you. So that's interesting. If you're trying to end your opponent quickly in proper, like, kind of traditional aggro fashion, I don't think this card's going to be a piece of the deck, but I don't think that's what we need to do. So I think Tyrannex Rex, we can't sleep on it. We're in a very grindy, very control-heavy environment. Like, I know it's mid-range decks. Like, when I say control-heavy, I don't necessarily mean decks that are, like, traditionally controlled decks are dominant. I just mean that people are running a ton of interaction. Like, a ton of it. It's all over the place. So the fact that Tyrannex Rex can kind of get around most of that just by the text printed on itself, like, regardless of what's surrounding it, is pretty cool. And in those long, grindier games, this thing is going to be, can be the decider in your favor, especially if you've softened them up early with a good aggressive strategy that they've had to respond to. So, I don't know. I think this thing's great. I love it a lot. Not going to lie. But then, so I mentioned we have a ton of kill spells running all over the place. So we need to get around kill spells. We do. We also need to make sure, if we're the aggressive deck, we have creatures and they're attacking our opponents, and we need to make sure those combat encounters, those combat phases are ending in our favor. We need to make sure that no matter how the blocks shake out, we are getting in for positive damage and our creatures are surviving and theirs aren't, hopefully, right? That's the idea. So we need to make sure that every single combat encounter is advantageous for us. And we also need to protect our stuff from a ton of kill spells that are running around. Tyvar's Stand is possibly the strongest instant speed combat trick I've ever seen. I don't think green has had anything this good before. I've known other examples. I mean, there are like Veil of Summer. You've got cards like Heroic Intervention, which costs, it costs 2, but it encompasses everybody. But like, this is up there as some of the best right now. Like, Tamiyo Safekeeping was already a phenomenal way to just protect a thing, but that's all it could do. It could just protect a thing. Tyvar's Stand gives you the ability to protect a thing. It's basically Tamiyo Safekeeping for 1. If X equals 0. Because you get hexproof and indestructible on the creature. You don't gain the life, but whatever. And then in this case, you can also pump excess mana into it and buff the creature +X+X. So if you're attacking with 3 creatures and then they have 2 blockers, if you have a bunch of mana left over, you can just pump it into the unblocked creature and turn that into a kill shot. If they're also blocking in an awkward way or like putting their Sheoldred in front of one of your creatures in the hopes of just kind of like eating it real quick. If you're attacking with like a 2/2 and it looks like it's a desperation move and they put their Sheoldred in front of it, guess what? You can pump your mana into a Tyvar's Stand, buff that creature, it kills their Sheoldred. The Death Touch is irrelevant because you have Indestructible, and all of a sudden, this becomes a kill spell through combat in kind of a cool way. So green mages everywhere who want an opportunity to like really, take a stand and let your decks really shine, this becomes a 4-of on day 1. I think this card is critical in the current meta, and it is an absolute house. Honestly, of all the cards that I've seen out of Phyrexia, all will be 1. I anticipate this being the best chance to get a green-based aggro deck in the meta. Now, to be honest, it being mono green, I don't think is super likely. I think we're gonna have to do some kind of shenanigans. Like, I don't know if we're gonna have to go Gruul so we can have some of those cheap creatures in the early game and get like Halana and Elena going, because that card is just quietly amazing. Get that stuff going. I don't know. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe we need to go Golgari so we can like recur some of our stuff or take advantage of some of the very powerful black creatures that are out there too. There are probably gonna be a lot of angles on this. And honestly, I don't know that we have enough tools to dig mono green aggro out from where to get it up to the level that it used to be. Honestly, bottom line, I do not see that happening. But this card gives me hope that A, green aggressive deck might rise to the top. And then maybe not, I don't know. There will be one. There will be something that takes advantage of this card. This card is too good to not find a home. It's too good to not find a home. It's phenomenal. People will be splashing for this. This card rocks. Like, of all the Phyrexia All-Will-Be-One cards I've seen so far, this actually might be my favorite and the one that I'm most excited to play. Honestly, and it's an uncommon. So everybody can craft it right away on Arena. Let's go. I'm excited. This thing's amazing. Now, the other note that I want to make. We've been talking a lot about Standard's mono green aggro deck that we've seen in the past, and if something like it can survive and thrive in the newer meta. I think if green is going to be truly relevant and truly be a player in competitive Magic, in Standard at least, in the near future, March of the Machine might change everything in the upcoming sets, who knows. But for right now, after one drops, green might have to adapt, and we might have to adjust the plan, because the plan in the past has always been play super efficient creatures, beat the opponent to death, protect my creatures, have them fight your creatures, and yay, and I beat you down before you have a chance to really set up your game plan. That has been the way the green's done it in the past, and frankly, the green's generally very good at that. But there are a couple of other cards that, to be fair, the Bloated Contaminator fits into. This thing could fit this new strategy very, very well. And that is specifically focusing on poison counters. Honestly, a full-on green toxic deck. You'll notice that a couple of the cards we've talked about today fit the toxic. Actually, the Tyranix Rex does too. Has fit this like toxic poison counter approach. And we also have a card, Venerated Rot Priest. It is a 1/2 for 1 with Toxic 1, and whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell, target opponent gets a poison counter. Honestly, this might be the perfect one-drop for that kind of a deck, because even though a 1/2 for 1 is not generally the kind of stat line you want to see in your aggressive deck, unless it's Swift Spear. Monastery Swift Spear gets a little bit of a pass. Prowess and haste is kind of amazing. But in this case, it's not generally the kind of stats you want to see. But if your opponent has a cut down, you're giving him a poison counter right away, like before they get a chance to do anything. That's pretty cool. And so even if they have the answer in a lot of situations, you're still tagging them with one of those counters, which means any proliferation you do throughout the course of the game is going to be giving them additional poison counters. Then add into the mix a couple of toxic creatures, and all of a sudden that is a very real clock and very real pressure you are applying to your opponent very quickly. So I think Venerated Rot Priest is also a green card that is going to see a ton of play, and probably in a deck that we don't currently have. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, you can use Venerated Rot Priest in combination with cards like March of Swirling Mist that can target multiple creatures, and Ivy that allows you to copy spells that are targeting your things to incredible effect. So a Simic toxic, proliferate, poison counter deck, leveraging Venerated Rot Priest, you're going to see people trying that, whether it's good or not, I don't know, we'll see, but that's going to be out there too. But in general, I think green is getting a massive power boost, massive. And if anything can save green in the current meta, this might be it. And by this, of course, I mean Tyvar Stand. This card is on a whole other level of incredible. So we'll see. I'm very excited to get my hands on some of these green cards and see what we can do with them. I will be attempting to do some green aggro things in Standard over on my stream. I stream, by the way, twitch.tv/hamhawks42. That is the primary place you can find me on the internet. I'm there Monday through Friday in the mornings. If you're on the Western Hemisphere like me, I'm in Eastern Standard Time, and I start around about 7:30 a.m., and we go for a couple of hours every day, Monday through Friday. I'd love to see you out there trying to play with some of these once they're released. So thank you so much for checking out the video. I would love also your thoughts on green and Standard. Do you think it can hang after this release? And frankly, do you think it's better than people are giving it credit for right now? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you have seen any cards or interactions that you think are going to help really elevate green into the competitive landscape moving forward, please leave those in the comments below. I'd appreciate it very, very much. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit that subscribe and the thumbs up. I appreciate it very, very much, and I'll catch you on the next one.